Welcome to the Breaking 90 podcast, where we talk about all things sustainable fat loss. We take people on 90-day journeys to creating fat loss forever. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Breaking 90 podcast. I'm here today with my co-host, Jerrika Rydell. We are two of the coaches of Breaking 90 Fitness. Thanks for being here. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hey, Jerrika.
Hey, Alex. How are you?
Doing well. How you doing?
Good. I know I'm not, I guess it was just a long weekend. I don't know when you're listening to this, but we have a wave runner / Sea-Doo. People don't really realize. And so we took it from Manitoulin Island to Killarney. Took about 40 minutes or so. It was the coolest thing, like on the water. And then we had lunch, and it was just it's cool to see the environment from a different perspective from driving to Killarney from Sudbury. It was really fun. I would highly recommend even just Killarney if no one's been to that area, hiking and camping. Is it the type of thing where you feel like if you were going much longer, though, it wouldn't be a super comfortable ride? On the Sea-Doo, probably. Yeah. It was a pretty mild day. There wasn't a ton of wind or anything, so it was fun, and you can go pretty fast. Yeah. I would definitely recommend a boat if you have a boat. Yeah. It'd probably be a lot more comfortable, but yeah, it was a blast. That's the thing. Sea-Doos are like the most fun thing ever, but they're not super practical or comfortable. And like, it's just like, unless you have other friends with them, they're hard to make purpose of. Do you guys have more than one or access to more than one? We have one, and we keep bugging all of our friends because exactly that reason. It's like, it's just way more fun when there's other people with you. For sure. But they're so much fun. Every time you ride one, you're like, well, I'd love to have one of these. But I just think like there's not a lot you can do from a Sea-Doo. You're not going to go fishing from a Sea-Doo. It can't carry a whole lot of people. It's definitely like pure enjoyment, like skiing and tubing or whatever. And then just for that exhilaration, really, is like, that's all it is. But it is really fun. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Cool. What you got for a topic today? So this is a topic that I'm actually really surprised that we haven't touched on. I spent some time skimming through all of our podcasts on Spotify, and I didn't see this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but protein. Like, we've done macronutrient breakdown, but we haven't really dug into just protein. And I mean, we push protein so much in our program. We try to get clients eating more and learning how to incorporate more into their lifestyle. And especially in the fat loss program, which I think is something we could touch on, why we want you to eat more protein in our fat loss program as well. And then, I don't know, we'll start there. And then I have something else I wanted to go into off of that. Okay, cool. I think I would start by saying that most people, they're lacking in the amount of protein they eat. And there's a lot of different reasons. We'll cover the different reasons today, but that I would say it's like almost always one of the big factors when we get a new client is the lack of protein they're consuming. And a huge part of that reason is that it's just not what most people are excited about. Like, there's not a lot of people that they go to protein as their go-to snack when carbs or fat are on the table. And some people might argue that and be like, no, I love protein. Well, the truth is you probably love the fat or the carb that go with that protein. Like a lot of people love steak or ribs or the fattier proteins. There's not a lot of people that are just going to sit down and munch on like a chicken breast, right? Right, unless you're me or something. Yeah. But you're right. Actually, now that I think of it, I like sometimes if I'm eating a piece of chicken, it's like, well, what can I dip this in? Totally. Right? It's not so much just, you're right, the chicken, it's like added stuff with it. Yeah. And so we talk about the protein being the hurdle because you don't enjoy it. Well, the truth is nobody really enjoys it. Like, it's one of those things that it's like most people enjoy fruit more than vegetables. Well, you still need to eat the vegetables. Most people enjoy carbs and fat more than protein. You still need to eat the protein. Some of what we eat needs to be forced. It can't always be about what you're excited to eat. We can make it more enjoyable, more exciting, but it can't always be what we're excited to eat, right? For sure. And I think, like you mentioned right off the hop, that most people undereat protein. And it makes me think of the old the Canadian Food Guide, and the recommendations, right, are somewhere between 0.4 and 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. Whereas now, and research that's now out is pushing more towards that 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So, if you're a 180 pound person, the goal would be to get you eventually to 180 grams of protein, or just under, give or take some. So I think that's been probably one of the biggest changes in the nutrition world, in terms of from what it used to be with our parents maybe growing up to what it is now with the new recommendations.
Yeah, and I think calculators and goals are great, but for most people, it's not realistic, right? So even we got caught up in these calorie calculators and protein calculators, water consumption calculators. Well, what is realistic for you might be entirely different. So that's important to look at too. 180 grams of protein is never going to happen for most people, right?
Absolutely. It's that continuum chat we always talk about. Yeah. Where are you now? Most people are probably, if let's say I'm a 180 pound person, I'm maybe eating 80. Right. Yeah. So maybe let's just try to have one more serving would take me to 100. And we don't even need, like you said, to know these specific numbers, because something as simple as a palm size of protein is a serving. So it's something as simple as adding that extra palm in. It's better than you were yesterday, last week, last month, etc.
The really good thing about protein is you're not likely going to overconsume it. So it's not going to hurt you to add protein unless you have a medical condition that is specified otherwise. Some people with like kidney failure and kidney function problems, they've been told to limit their protein in amount per feedings, but for the average person, there's not going to be any risk in eating too much protein, and you're not going to anyway. Like, nobody's going to sit down and eat 6 chicken breasts.
No, definitely not. So if I'm one of our fat loss clients coming into the program, or really just anyone who's interested in maybe taking that route, why should I be aiming to eat more if fat loss is the goal?
Yeah, good question. So out of the 3 macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat, protein keeps you full the longest, which is a really, really important factor, because being hungry sucks, and you don't need to constantly feel hungry in order to make progress. You need some level of hunger. Obviously, our body's going through changes, and we're eating in a calorie deficit, which means our body does want more. So there will be some level of hunger. But how you break down those foods you choose to eat is going to play a massive role in how hungry you are. So when we prioritize protein, it keeps us full longer, makes us feel better. Although it's not what we're craving, our body will benefit more from it in that standpoint. Anything you want to add there before I keep going?
Nope, it's good.
Okay. From a fat storage standpoint, so when we eat in excess of calories and then don't burn it off and it gets stored as fat, protein gets stored slightly less than the other 2 macronutrients, which is a bonus. We end up urinating some of it out and passing some of it through bowel movements. From a building block standpoint, it plays so carbs play a huge role on our short-term, our quick energy. Protein plays a massive role in our rebuilding, in our bone rebuilding, muscle rebuilding, tissue rebuilding. Protein plays one of the biggest roles out of the 3 macronutrients there. And so providing adequate protein allows us to repair, recover, which is essentially what fat loss is. I mean, our body's getting broken down and depleted from whatever movement we're doing. The carbs are providing a lot of the energy, and then the protein's allowing us to recover quicker so that we can get back to that exercise and that movement, and we can continue improving and growing from whatever we're putting our body through. And I don't want you to think that that's just for somebody who's seriously into weightlifting, because it's everything. It's just day-to-day movement. Even without providing adequate calories equals energy. So without providing adequate calories for energy and adequate protein for recovery, we're going to feel like shit. We're not going to recover well. We're not going to want to continue moving our body. The less we move our body, the less energy we burn, the less calories we burn, the less fat we lose.
Awesome. I want to just repeat that for those that they missed it. If you're on a fat loss journey and you may not be lifting weights regularly or pushing it in the gym whatsoever, you might be doing regular walks and, just things that don't require the added weight to you. You still need to consume this protein for the building blocks, for the repair. So I think that's really important because a lot of people just assume, well, I'm not in the gym, I don't need the protein, when in reality we do.
For sure. And when I look at how much protein somebody should be consuming, I look at their lean body mass as opposed to just their current body mass.
Yeah, awesome.
And so obviously somebody who's got a ton of muscle mass will need more protein, but everybody needs protein. So if you're currently 200 pounds and you want to be sitting around 130 pounds, you don't need to be eating protein for a 200-pound person, but you should absolutely be eating protein for a 130-pound person, right?
That's a really good point. Yeah, I love
that. And you don't need to run that through a calculator. Basically, you can keep it really simple. What we do is we tell people hand size portions. So we look at how many hand size portions of protein you're eating right now, on average daily, and we try to increase that by 1 until it becomes consistent. And then once that becomes consistent, we can look at increasing it by 2. So you might get to the point where you're having 3, 4, 5, 6 palm-sized servings of protein per day. What does that equal? I don't know. It's going to be a little bit different for each person, a little bit different based off of which protein choices you're making. The idea here is to push your comfort zone a little bit, knowing that there's not really a risk of going over, and that as much as we can add in regularly is going to be beneficial. So that's a really important factor. I want you being consistent with protein, consistent with everything, really. I don't want you being intense. I don't want one day you having 10 servings of protein, one day you having 1 serving of protein, and telling me on average you eat 5 servings of protein, because that's not how it works.
Right.
The more consistent we can be with our protein, the more beneficial it becomes to the body. That goes day to day, week to week, and even serving to serving, unfortunately.
Cool. Yeah.
Anything you want to touch on there? I can dive a little bit into the servings, but anything you want to cover there?
No, I was just going to ask you about if you could be more specific, because I think some people listening might be a bit confused there.
So serving to serving, our body can only benefit from so much protein. What that number is completely different from person to person. So I can't tell you if it's 50 grams of protein or 60 grams of protein or what it might be. It is going to be different from person to person, how much your body can absorb in a single serving. The good thing is, like I said earlier, the stuff that we don't eat gets more of it gets sent through the waste system than carbs and fat. So if we overeat protein, less of it gets stored as fat. So without knowing that exact amount, we do know that everybody's got a cap. Just like creatine's another example of this, but everybody's got a cap of how much protein they can benefit from in a single serving. And that is different from person to person. It's not entirely based off size and weight. There's other factors that come into play here. So I don't even know if you can find out what that cap is, to tell you the truth, but we're going to assume no. Without knowing that, we know that there's benefit to spreading it out. And so the more we can spread out our protein, the easier it is for our body to use it. But that's still not as important as just getting enough protein. So if your life's crazy, your schedule is crazy, and you're like, how the hell am I going to get 10 different feedings of protein? I'm not asking you to get 10 different feedings of protein. I'm telling you, if you have the ability to spread it out, spread it out. If you don't, it's still more important to get it than not to get it. So if you have to eat all 180 grams of protein in 1 serving, that's still better than not getting enough protein.
Awesome. And I'm glad you touched on that, because I don't want to instill fear on those listening being like, oh no, I can only have 10 grams or 20 grams, because I know a lot of the information out there is like a 20 gram, this number floating around, 20 grams serving or per serving. Whereas you can actually absorb a lot more than we think we can. Oh, yeah. Like you mentioned at the beginning, like 50, 60, like we don't know, but those numbers are a lot higher than they used to be thought that they were. So I don't want us walking around with fear to be like, oh, I have to have all these small little amounts throughout the day. They can be quite large, and you can have, a significant amount and not worry about it whatsoever.
It's actually,
I really don't think most people are going to consume enough to really have to worry about it in one sitting.
It's actually similar to taxes. And this is a tax question that a lot of people don't understand. When you make, there's different tax brackets that you get taxed different amounts when you're in those tax brackets. The lower tax bracket doesn't get taxed very much. If you make $1 more, you don't get taxed that higher tax bracket on all of the dollars you've made. You get taxed the lower tax bracket on the first portion and the higher tax bracket on the $1 extra you made. The same thing applies to protein. Does that make sense what I just said?
Yeah.
Well? Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no fear of making $1 extra and going into another tax bracket. That $1 is the only dollar that gets taxed at a higher rate. The same thing applies to protein. So our windows at a lower protein bracket, we absorb all of it. Eat a little bit more, some of that will get absorbed less. Eat a little bit more, some of that will get absorbed less. So if you have the ability to break it down into like 30 to 40 gram servings, probably most of it is being absorbed. But if we go to 50, it's not like you're screwing over all of that protein. Most of that 30 to 40 is still being absorbed. Some of that extra 10 grams you just ate won't be absorbed, but not all of it.
Awesome. Yeah, great point.
Cool. What else do you want to cover from a protein standpoint? I mean, you could go super far down this rabbit hole.
No, I think we'll take this a little bit more, kind of take it in with a little more, some tips, I guess, because with our clients and with those listening, we often get messages like, hey, I can't get my protein and I'm really struggling. I need some ideas, right? And it's that's one of probably the most common, one of the top 5 that we get is the protein question. So I just thought we can kind of finish it up by maybe each giving our top 5 tips or go-tos, or just for the easy, convenient, like nothing that's going to take forever to cook, but just give maybe some ideas of just some things we eat.
Cool. I'm going to start with Greek yogurt because I think it's super versatile. It's easy to consume. We can, if you have it readily available, you can add it to smoothies. You can add it to yogurt just bowls with fruit. You can add it to other baking and recipes. We can make sauces out of it by adding hot sauce or spices, which go great on your meats, your salads. Greek yogurt for me is an absolute go-to. If you don't like it, try different flavors, try different blends, try different things with it because it is so ultra versatile.
Awesome. That was one on my list too, so that's good. I'm going to touch on chicken, but be more specific. So for me, this is for people often, you don't have anything made and the excuse is like, I have nothing ready, so I can't prepare my protein. What can I do? And, just last night, we do have one of those Ninja Foodies. It's like a pressure cooker / everything else that I can do.
Like an Instapot?
So okay. Exactly. So if everyone has an Instapot, I threw 4 or 5 completely frozen chicken breasts right in there with like a cup or 2 of chicken broth, put the lid on, 12 minutes. I had pulled chicken. I just threw in some buffalo wing sauce and whatever, just for some flavor. And it's like, now I have chicken ready for lunches for whatever salads for the next 4 days. And it's just like in 12 minutes from frozen, although it might not, doesn't taste as fresh, but it's pulled chicken. So it doesn't, it's shredded pretty small. It's one of my favorite kind of no excuses when people try to give me the excuse. It's like, well, it's frozen and it still works. So
here's the thing. That's awesome in a pinch, but at the end of the day, failing to plan is planning to fail, right? When we occasionally get to dinner time and don't have something taken out, that's life. That's going to happen. You're going to have to figure something out. If that is a recurring habit that's happening to you consistently, you need to break that habit. You need to create a system so that you don't continuously end up there. And so those are great for in a pinch, but first and foremost, recognize that if this is holding you back and it's happening continuously, you need to create a new system. Those frozen meats,
don't rely on it.
Yeah, those frozen meats can go in the slow cooker at the beginning of the day. Those frozen meats can be taken out at the beginning of the day. We shouldn't continuously be getting to dinner time and not having something ready. That's a huge barrier for most people. And it just comes down to not planning. You don't need to meal prep, do crazy meal preps, but you can't leave this thing up to chance. If we leave it up to chance, we're going to fail.
And honestly, one of our clients, sometimes it's by choice. She chooses, this goes back to number one, she chooses to have Greek yogurt for dinner because it's something she loves almost every single night for dinner. Right. Yeah. And that's planned, and that's great. It's not like there's much prep involved, but it's something that she looks forward to, and it kind of checks all the boxes for her. So as long as, like you said, there's a plan there, and it's readily available, or it can be. I love that she does that all the time.
I have two more things I want to cover. Perfect. I might think of more as we go, but the next one is that we need to get out of the mindset of thinking of conventional meals, because it doesn't always need to be a conventional meal to work. You can have that chicken for breakfast. You can have those eggs for dinner. It's great when you go to somebody's house and you have a nice conventional meal, but we're not always eating for pleasure, and we're not always eating for presentation or to take a picture and put it on Instagram. We are now eating for a purpose. Our purpose is if you're listening to this, your purpose is probably to lose fat. It doesn't need to be beautiful and presentable to work, right? So we need to have proteins, carbs, and fats within balance. That could literally mean that you have a piece of chicken with an apple and some almonds. Is it a presentable meal? No, but you can control the quantities, hit the marks, and walk away from that meal with balance. So I think getting out of that mindset that it's like, oh, I really struggle with breakfast, I don't know what to eat for breakfast. Well, then start eating dinner stuff for breakfast. It doesn't need to be eggs or a smoothie. Those are great, but it doesn't need to be.
Awesome. My next one is in mass amounts. And these are all just like the take home tips, but cook in mass amounts. There's no reason why, if you're cooking 3 chicken breasts for dinner tonight, or, a couple pork chops, whatever you're making, just buy double and cook it all at once. Then you're guaranteed to have a meal for the next day. Or the barbecue is a great example, right? You're throwing on a few pieces of chicken, well, then throw on twice the amount. And I think that's what I often say to clients. Well, what did you have for dinner tonight? And they'll list their conventional meal style. And it's like, well, why can't that be your lunch tomorrow? Why didn't you cook enough? Right. So there's always should be enough for the next day, in my opinion. And that's kind of the rule of thumb at my house.
Yeah, I agree. And even further, I mean, if you don't get extremely bored, leftovers are usually good for 4 or 5 days. So even like if you want to push that further, instead of cooking 2 servings, cook 3 or 4 servings of it, unless you're one of those people that just gets crazy bored and can't eat it. But these things can also be repurposed, right? You can, just because you had chicken, rice, and broccoli one night, that chicken could then go into a wrap or into an omelet or onto a salad. Like, you can repurpose these same items in different ways.
Definitely. I have one more, so you do your one and I got one.
Okay, my last one's going to be, I think my last one, we'll see if anything else comes to mind. My last one's going to be eggs. Eggs is one, a lot of people fear eggs because of the high fat content and a lot of old misbeliefs of the cholesterol in eggs and how they're really not good for us in large quantities. I think what you guys will discover as you lose weight and get healthier, your blood work will get better regardless of how many eggs you're eating. Some people have really extreme cholesterol circumstances and they have to limit certain foods. Most people don't. This is similar to the over protein thing. You probably don't have to worry about dietary cholesterol from eggs. It's not going to affect your blood cholesterol if you're continuing to get healthier. Now, eggs are really versatile because we can obviously make things like omelets or just have eggs on their own or hard boil them for ease of use. They can also be added to most recipes almost undetected. You can throw an egg into your stir fry. You can throw eggs into meats that like hamburgers or meatloafs that you're cooking. I love the idea of, we usually tell people to try to eat 3 eggs for 1 serving. I love the idea of, if you can't eat 3 eggs in 1 serving, have 2 now, throw the 3rd one in your stir fry later. And now you've got 3 eggs throughout your day, right? They're just really, really versatile. And I think a lot of people shy away from them because they're afraid of that higher fat count. That higher fat count is probably not the first thing you need to worry about.
Yeah. And if you're someone who just doesn't like the flavor texture of them, that's okay. You can also do egg whites in a carton and you can dump those right into your smoothie. You can dump them right into whatever you're cooking. They're pasteurized, so I mean, you can literally drink them from the carton, but you just pour them. They're liquid, and you just pour them into anything, and you don't even realize that they're there.
Yep. And egg whites are where we get most of the protein. Egg yolk are where we get most of the nutrients. So depending on what your goals are, they both serve their purpose. They both can be really, really beneficial on a fat loss journey.
Definitely. So my last one's just the freezer foods. So we often, you and I always talk about how we do chilies and stews and things in that nature. So again, this kind of goes back to cooking in mass amounts, but like ground chicken, ground turkey, ground beef, and making some type of mixed vegetable, whatever, and then freeze a bunch of them. And then you have access. The freezer, things can stay really, really good for a really, really long time. So you always have access to grabbing something out in the morning, putting it on the counter, and then you're ready for dinner.
I'm going to piggyback off of that. When you freeze your meats, freeze them in usable portion sizes rather than freezing 8 chicken breasts together. Yes. Break it into serving like two chicken breasts and freeze them together so that it becomes more usable and it doesn't sit in the freezer forever until you throw it out.
That's funny. I actually put mine into 8s because we'll eat like 3 or 4 in one dinner. And then I'm like, well, then tomorrow it's cooked. So go back to my other tip and cook more for the next day.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I've been there too. I've bought a huge pot of chicken. Like, what is it? You don't eat it by the expiry date. You're like, oh, well, I'll just throw the whole thing in the freezer. And then it's like daunting to look at this massive pack of chicken in the freezer.
It's so true. Awesome. That's everything I want to touch on today, actually, and more. So that's awesome.
Sweet. I don't know if we said it, but smoothies is worth mentioning. It's a quick source of protein. You can add a ton of protein because you can add Greek yogurt and protein powder and other protein sources, but those two together, you can get your protein count up really high, and it's a fast, easy to consume meal. So that's worth mentioning.
Yeah. Awesome. One of my go-tos lately.
What do you got for us for a tip?
Well, you see, my tip was one of the tips I just gave, and then I actually incorporated it into our big group of it. So you know what? We just left everyone with a ton of tips. So we'll leave it at that today.
Perfect. I'm good with that. All right. So thank you guys for being here. I hope you found something from this episode helpful, something that you hadn't considered in the past. And if nothing else, I hope it challenges you to increase your protein intake. As always, wherever you're listening to this, take a screenshot right now. Share it to your Instagram story and tag at Breaking 90 Fitness so we can see that you're listening. We really appreciate that. And that's how we get more eyes on the podcast. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode.